I'm Cassie. I'm an engineer for Mud Hog, the on-demand hydraulic rear-wheel drive system we're about to install on your combine. I'm here to give you a quick rundown on what it takes to install this legendary system. Now remember, this video is not intended to replace your manuals. Refer to your installation manual for details about your individual machine. So first things first, let's talk about safety. When working on your combine, take precautions to keep yourself safe. Wear the necessary personal protection equipment and be smart about lifting heavy components. Block the front wheels of the machine to prevent the machine from rolling. Use a capable and well-maintained lifting device to jack up the rear of the machine and use jack stands to safely hold it while you work. Before we install the Mud Hog, we need to remove the non-powered components. Remove the steering cylinders and tie rod and set them aside. The steering cylinders don't need to be removed from the center section if the tread setting of the axle won't change. We'll determine if it will change in the next step. Remove the non-powered wheel ends. You will be left with a bare axle with only the center section and stub axles. You'll find a chart in your installation manual. This chart will tell you three things based on your machine characteristics. 1. The width settings of the axle. 2. The height setting of the wheel ends. And 3. The stop bolt settings. This machine requires the stub axles to be set in the 6th position. To install the wheel ends, carefully lift them with a lifting device that will safely hold the weight without interfering with the machine. Check your manual to see if your installation requires any thread locker. Carefully align the correct holes according to the chart in the installation manual for wheel end height, and get all bolts started in the threaded holes by hand. When all bolts are threaded in as far as possible by hand, snug them down with an impact wrench. Only remove the lift straps after the bolts are tightened with the impact wrench. Torque the bolts according to your installation manual's instructions. After the wheel ends are installed, set the stop bolt length according to measurements from the chart in your installation manual. In this step, we'll install the steering cylinders, hose guides, and tie rod. Slip the hose guides over the ends of the steering cylinders and install into the blocks on the center section. Then install into the steering gears. Carefully snug down the castle nut. Torque per your install manual and insert and bend the cotter pin to keep the castle nut secure. If the axle tread setting for the powered axle is close to that of the non-powered, you can leave the tie rod as one solid piece for installation. but remember that you will have to unbolt the 2 sections to set the toe in later. Install the tie rod ends into the steering ears and carefully start the tie rod end threads by hand. Carefully snug down the castle nut and torque to the specs in your installation manual. Insert and bend the cotter pin. In this step, we'll install the valve assembly to the axle using 2 holes that are already on the machine. Here are the 2 holes for the bolts that will hold the valve assembly. It is helpful to have a third person hold the backside of the bolt so it doesn't fall through the hole while the valve bracket is being installed. When both bolts are securely started by hand and with a third person holding the bolt heads, snug them down with an impact wrench. Torque to installation manual specs. In your install manual, you'll find all the information on the hoses that come in the kit. First, bundle the hoses for each side of the machine together. There will be 3 hoses for each side. See your manual for specifics. Sleeve each bundle of hoses in the provided Cordura sleeving. Pay close attention to the hose ends and which hoses go to which side. The tread width settings on the axle will determine the hose routing. See your manual for more information. For the narrowest 4 settings, the 45-degree fittings on the ends of the hoses will point toward the rear of the axle. For the wider settings, the 45-degree fittings on the ends of the hoses will point toward the center of the axle. Regardless of tread width settings, all hoses will be routed through the hose guides. First, route the sleeve hoses through the hose guides. This axle is on width setting number 6, so the 45-degree hose ends should point toward the center of the axle. Install the hoses on the valve body. Remember to torque all fittings when hoses are completed. For torque values, see the install manual. Next, we'll install the hoses that allow the combine to send flow to the rear axle. Locate your machine's pump and notice the hoses that are already coming down the side of the machine from the pump. We will be adding 4 hoses to this bundle. Remove the flanges on the rear of the pump and install the manifold blocks between the existing flange kits and the pump. Use the bolts from the Mud Hog kit and reuse the existing washers. Consult your manual for torque specs. Install the forward and reverse adapters into the manifold blocks as specified in your manual. Do not install the forward and reverse hoses yet. Do not torque fittings or adapters until entire hose install is complete. Next, install the 4 hoses on the valve body. These hoses are forward, reverse, and 2 drain hoses. Run them through a hose protector and bundle them to the existing hoses on the way up the side of the machine. Locate the plug in the bottom corner of the PTO oil pan and install the adapter specified in your installation manual. Connect the shorter drain hose specified in your manual to this adapter. Locate the drain manifold on the top right side of the pump and connect the longer drain hose to this manifold. Route and secure these 2 hoses to existing hoses in a manner to prevent contact from any moving parts. Connect the forward and reverse hoses to the appropriate fittings in the manifold blocks we installed in the pump. Torque all fittings and adapters to the specs in your manual. Tidy all hoses and secure them properly. Setting the toe in for the rear axle is necessary to prevent excessive and uneven wear on the tires and to ensure proper operation of the Mud Hog. This is done by measuring the distance between the center of the tires in front of the axle and the rear. A chart in your install manual will tell you how much of a difference there should be. We set the toe in by adjusting the tie rod ends and the holes between the 2 tie rod pieces. Toe-in can be set with the wheels and tires mounted, but if there is a set of toe-in bars handy, those tend to be easier to work with. That's what we'll be using in this video, but the procedure is the same if you are using the tires. Measure the width of the rear axle at the ends of the toe-in bars or at the center of the tires in front and in rear of the axle. Remove the 3 bolts connecting the 2 pieces of the tie rod. Adjust the tie rod ends until the correct toe-in is set and the holes in the tie rod pieces line up. Try to maintain a consistent amount of exposed threads on both tie rod ends. Remeasure often and be aware that this can be a lengthy, iterative process. It's not always as easy as shown here. Please note that if you set the toe-in with toe-in bars instead of using the wheels, it will be helpful to wait to mount the wheels until after you install the wiring. We'll talk about that next. When it comes time to mount the wheels, whether it's before or after setting the toe-in, first make sure the tires are in the correct orientation. Install the lug bolts and spacers and torque to the specs in your manual. Apply the torque spec decal to the wheel motor face if one is supplied in your kit. Check lug bolt torque after 10 hours of machine operation. In this step, we'll install the wiring harness. There will be 2 main harnesses. The main power harness, which is short and goes from the combine to the solenoid on the valve, and the dual speed harness, which goes to each wheel drive and is much longer. Route the dual speed wire harness from the valve bracket, through the hose guide, and to the wheel drives. Connect the harness to the connector on the wheel drives and secure the harness to the hose sleeving. Locate the existing lower frame harness, which runs along the underside of the machine above the rear axle. Connect the dual speed harness and the short pigtail on the solenoid of the valve to this existing machine harness. These connectors should be designed to not allow an incorrect connection. Consult your manual for more information. Your machine may or may not have a Mud Hog switch already included in the instrument cluster in your machine. Depending on your machine specifications, the procedure for activating and/or installing the switch to engage the Mud Hog axle will differ. Please consult your installation manual for specific information on your individual machine. There are a few things to do before starting your machine for the first time. At this point, leave the machine up on the jack stands. Check that the stop bolts contact the C-frames during a full turn to the right and left, and check that the wheels clear the machine in full turns. Visually check for tire clearance with the frame or side panels in extreme oscillation angles. Make any adjustments if needed. Check that all bolts, nuts, and hydraulic connections are tightened and that hoses and wiring are routed securely. Without starting the machine, operate the Mud Hog switch on and off and listen for a soft clicking sound at the valve. When the Mud Hog switch is on, the solenoid on the valve will become magnetized. In addition to listening for the click, you can also check for magnetization with a small metal object. If it doesn't click, the wiring has not been connected properly, or the Mud Hog has not been set up properly on the machine's screens in the cab. Fill the hydrostatic reservoir and PTO reservoir with oil that meets the specifications in your machine's owner's manual. Listed in your installation manual is a detailed step-by-step guide for your specific machine's startup procedure. It is vital that these steps be completed in entirety and in the correct order. Any alteration of this procedure will defeat the purpose of the entire effort. Please take the time to perform this procedure properly. Once your machine is started up, you're good to go. Happy harvesting! For more information, visit our website.